Hey, really glad you're with us for the Tuesday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. So much to talk about today on major consequential issues. Unless, of course, you don't want Social Security to be around when you retire, or you don't think a trial by jury is important to have in your justice system, or you don't want costs to be lower. Other than that, we're not talking about anything important. But, Jim, we should also point out that today's election day in the 7th Congressional District in Tennessee. And so you've got Republican Matt Van Epps, military veteran, and seems like a pretty strong conservative, against Afton Bain, who hates Nashville and country music and the police and the nuclear family. But, you know, it's going to be a really tough choice for conservatives. The important thing is to get out and vote.
Listeners, let's make sure that Afton Bain is a strong contender for only the 2025 Three Martini Lunch podcast End of the Year Awards in one of the crazy categories, because I really don't want to be talking about her in 2026 and 2027 and beyond. Let this be her 15 minutes of fame and or infamy.
Yeah, exactly. You don't get 3 days in a row as a crazy martini for nothing. So Tennessee 7 voters, do your thing, and we'll see how it all shakes out. All right, well, let's talk about our good martini, and that is Republicans, at least one, finally getting serious about the fact that things are still unaffordable in a lot of different ways, not burying the head in the sand, and then actually offering a number of suggestions for how to make certain parts of our economy a little bit less expensive. We're talking about Montana Senator Tim Sheehy, freshman Republican, distinguished military veteran on his own. He's written recently in the Wall Street Journal in response to a Wall Street Journal editorial that said an agendaless GOP Congress, which he says, you know, they made some good points in this editorial about the fact that inflation is still a problem. He says a major problem remains the inflation that the Biden-Harris administration unleashed on working families. And he says the left's answer to this issue is almost always the same. Build more bureaucracy and throw more subsidies at the problem. We've tried that for decades. The result has been the most expensive housing in the developed world. Grocery prices still 25 to 30% higher than pre-pandemic levels, and health insurance premiums, they climb faster than wages every year. So he says Republicans should use their control of Congress to actually improve things, namely by deregulation and actually helping to make things more affordable. For example, he has 3 examples here. He says housing supply constraints have driven up costs for years. The median home price exceeds $400,000 and rents consume more than 30% of many household incomes. A good place to start is by reforming zoning laws, which have turned the average construction permitting process into a multi-year brawl with endless environmental reviews and lawsuits. He says by cutting through all that crap in Montana, homes are built 3 times as fast as the normal pace at about half the price. Grocery prices are up more than 30% since 2019. He says 4 corporate giants control 85% of the meatpacking market, for example. He wants more aggressive enforcement of the Packers and Stockyards Act. And then he says price transparency, particularly in healthcare. He says the same aspirin that costs 4 cents at Walmart costs $82 in a hospital. And so by deregulating, price transparency, actual enforcement of existing laws, Republicans can show the path forward here. So, Jim, I think in principle he's right. He's certainly right about the Democrats constantly taking the wrong approach to this. But I think the most important thing is acknowledging the problem's real.
Yeah, look, there are a lot of things that a Republican administration and congressional Republicans do not control when it comes to the economy. The market can be shaken by all kinds of stuff. It's being heavily driven by companies that are investing in AI. If you're hoping, if your portfolio includes any one of the big 7, you're hoping that they keep investing in that. But maybe they don't. Maybe they start getting a little reluctant about AI. So maybe that's going to cause the stock market to tumble. You can't, tariffs are something the administration could control, but the president seems pretty wedded to that. But right now, if you're a Republican, what you want to be doing is talk about the economy between now and Election Day 2026. Focus on it. Focus on regulation. Focus on every little aspect. Tim Sheehy, at minimum, gets the message, right? And there's, if you don't talk about the economy, if you try to talk about other things, it's not going to go well. And the president is not helping on this. I don't think a lot of people voted for Donald Trump in 2024 because they really wanted to get Jim Comey, because they really wanted to see a new ballroom added to the White House. I don't even think, they probably didn't like Maduro in Venezuela, but that was not front. So they were voting because the cost of living in the United States had gotten out of control, and they'd concluded that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris could not do anything about it. Greg, right now I'm looking over at Real Clear Politics. Trump's overall job approval, and the average there is currently 42.6 approval, 54.5 disapproval, negative 12.12. There are some that have it closer, negative 4-point spread in I tip poll. CBS poll has Trump down 40 to 60. That sounds really bad. That's a negative 20. But even you look at the economy, and traditionally this had always been one of President Trump's strengths going back to the first term. It's a negative 18.4% percentage point spread right now. And whether it's Morning Consult, Yahoo News, CBS News, they're all bad. Sometimes in the 20-some percent. People are not happy about the economy. People are not happy about the cost of living. People are not so if you're Trump, stop telling people that things are going great. Start acknowledging the problems. Start relating to people on some level. And if you're a congressional Republican, because your name is going to be on the ballot in 2026, not Donald Trump's, you got to go out there and you got to say, "This, we recognize the problem. We know the job is not done. You're going to see some advantages from the big, beautiful bill when the tax changes kick in next year. But until then, here are the changes we're doing. Here are the things we're passing. And whether you can pass them or not, bring them to the floor. Make the congressional Democrats vote against this. There are ways you don't have total control of what's going to happen between now and Election Day, but this is something that Republicans control, and they need to be doing. Senator Sheehy, thank you for leading the way on this.
Yeah, passing actual legislation and smart legislation. I mean, the ways you're going to get costs down that's fastest is bringing down the cost of energy by making the supply more abundant. Gas is below $3 in most states now, and so that's headed in the right direction. Still like to see it lower. And then deregulation. This was a huge priority in the first Trump administration. It might be in this administration, but I don't hear hardly anything about it. Hopefully it's happening. If it's not, they need to ramp that up. Make life easier for businesses. That makes costs lower. That makes prices lower. And so if we can get that ball rolling, hopefully things will be headed in the right direction.
And just one last note, Greg. Point out, a lot of these zoning laws, they're set locally, and they're the ones that are making it really, not in my backyard, that sort of stuff. But the president has a pretty big bully pulpit. The congressional Republicans, when they act, can have a pretty big bully pulpit on this. If one of the reasons housing costs are so high is because of regulations that make it extremely hard to build things, particularly in places like New York City, then at minimum put the spotlight on them and at least give the public the information and say, if you're wondering why there aren't more houses being built in your community to meet the demand, this is why, and explain to them and point out about how the various environmental regulations, the regulations on what kind of materials you have to use, all these things that make housing more expensive may not be a federal policy, but you can at least point them out and get people understanding why things are so expensive.
Exactly. You can set the conditions for things to improve. That's probably your main power at the federal level, but there are things that could be done and that could be done better. So hopefully that will happen. Again, kudos to Senator Sheehy. Let's talk about OneSkin, because if prices are out of control and, it's getting tighter and tighter between how much you're bringing in and how much you're spending each month, that'll put some lines in your face easily. And so let's work on that in terms of the skin. And between colder weather and the holidays, you can kind of feel the stress on your system. But OneSkin is the way to go, because OneSkin is a fantastic product. At the core is their patented OS1 peptide, the first ingredient proven to target senescent cells, which is the root cause of wrinkles, crepiness, and the loss of elasticity, which are all key signs of skin aging. And these results have now been validated in 5 different clinical studies.
The good people at OneSkin know that you want to have skin that looks good, but you also have a busy life. You don't want to spend a ton of time on this. You've got places to go, you've got people to see, and you'd like to look youthful and energetic and full of life when you get there. All of OneSkin's products are designed to layer seamlessly and replace multiple steps in your routine, which will make your skin health easier and smarter at every age. At the helm of this iconic skincare brand is their founding and all-woman team of longevity scientists with PhDs in stem cell biology, skin regeneration, and tissue engineering.
Yeah, as I've said before, I really enjoy the sunscreen. Don't need it today in DC, it can tell you that. Very rainy day, but it goes on easily. It blocks the UV rays, and it's better for your skin, certainly, than all those other sunscreens out there. So for a limited time, try OneSkin for 15% off using the code 3ML at oneskin.co/3ML. After you purchase, they'll ask you where you heard about them, so please support the 3 Martini Lunch and tell them that we sent you. That's code 3ML at oneskin.co/3ML. All right, Jim, on to our bad martini, and this is a really, really bad martini. Over in the UK, just before Thanksgiving, there were reports that the Keir Starmer government and the Justice Minister over there, David Lammy, were planning to, or were thinking about, just ending jury trials for not the worst crimes. So what they are implementing now is any crime where the sentence is likely to be 3 years or less, you just don't get a jury. The argument for this is that there's a backlog in the court systems and jury trials take too long compared to a trial conducted by a judge or a magistrate. Well, now this policy is official, announced today by the Justice Minister, David Lammy.
First, I will create new swift courts within the Crown Court with a judge alone deciding verdicts in triable either way cases with a likely sentence of 3 years or less, as Sir Brian recommends. Sir Brian estimates that they will deliver justice at least 20% faster than jury trials. And whilst jury deliberations remain confidential, judges provide reasoning for their verdicts in open court. So this will hardwire transparency into our new approach. Sir Brian also proposes restricting defendants' right to elect for jury trials, a practice not found widely in other common law jurisdictions. And let's be honest, it's a peculiar way to run a public service. Our world-leading judges should hear the most serious cases, and I agree that they and the magistrate should decide where a case is heard. This will prevent defendants from gaming the system, choosing whichever court they think gives the best chance of success and drawing out the process, hoping victims give up. And I will limit appeals from the magistrates' court so that they are only allowed on points of law to prevent justice being delayed further. Alongside these changes, we will increase magistrates' court sentencing powers to 18 months.
So, Jim, the argument here is not just about backlogs. He's trying to make a case that judges actually provide more transparency and swifter justice. I would say swifter verdicts, because not necessarily swifter justice here. And he's reducing appeals. I mean, core bedrock principle of the justice system is a trial by jury, and apparently you can just do it by edict over there in the UK and erase hundreds and hundreds of years of tradition.
So, Greg, I'm going to begin with some honesty and disclosure. I absolutely hate jury duty. And I know lots of Americans do. Dennis Miller used to do the joke. The only people who end up on a jury duty are the kinds of people who can't come up with an excuse to get out of jury duty. But with that said, you know, by the way, when it say, where do you work? National Review. All of a sudden defense attorneys don't want you on the jury anymore. All of a sudden, get rid of that guy, you know. But you go to jury duty, and usually one of the first things they do is they have you watch some introductory video, oftentimes with some cast member of Law and Order. Unfortunately, rarely Fred Thompson. Sit down and take your duty seriously. But they point out that, like, the right to serve on juries and have to be tried by a jury was a very huge deal to the Founding Fathers. This was a huge motivation in the American Revolution. This idea that Americans believed that if they were going to be convicted of a crime, that they should have their case before jurors who like them, people who are going to relate to them, people who are going to judge them fairly, people who understand the circumstances of their life and were going to decide, yes, this is definitely a crime, this person definitely did wrong, or no, there's some sort of extenuating circumstances, or the government has not proved its case, and something like that. It's very important like that. So the idea you could just, I realize this is the American experience compared to the British experience, but nonetheless, like, this is why it matters a great deal to us. But I think what we really see in this, I know it's that comment, our world-class judges should be hearing the most important cases. I don't know about you, Greg. I hear a little bit of distrust of juries in that. And now, and by the way, if you have ever, if you're frustrated with the jury system, sure, I get it. We all watch the OJ trial, right? We all recognize why there are times we think the jury has not gotten it right. But the one thing we can all recognize is that everybody gets their chance to make their case to the jury. And every once in a while, to have something like a couple of high-profile cases, down in Florida, things like that, where somebody gets tried in the media, and the media narrative is that he's guilty as sin, and then the jury comes back with an innocent verdict or not guilty verdict. Well, the jury has to pay attention to the whole thing. They don't just have to read one article or watch one television news segment or something. They will get the complete picture. And the nice thing about being in the jury box, you're not allowed to be on your cell phone. You're allowed to take notes, and that's about it. They do not want you. You are pretty much required to pay attention to every detail. The justice system is designed to put as much information about the case in the juror's head as possible. And the ideal is that it's only an issue in like really high-profile cases. The jurors don't know the defendant. They don't know the prosecutor. Ideally, they don't have any real connection to the justice system. They're going in as objective as possible, and they're going in paying as much attention as possible. And then they go and they render they deliberate and they render their verdict. Right? That's a pretty darn good system. The British are saying, well, because of the backlog, we don't want to have this anymore. I think this also represents a bifurcation of people's concepts of justice over in that country. And I think you might see it in this country as well. If you are the typical American, you're probably very seriously worried about violent crime. You're probably worried about, white collar crime. You are really not all that concerned about someone making a social media post or misgendering someone or something. Over in the UK, that's a huge deal. They got SWAT teams kicking down doors over people over their social media posts and stuff like that. I think a whole bunch of ordinary Britons look at that and say, I don't think that's really a crime. It might be rude. It might be mean. It might be bad. It might be bad manners. It might even be like really terrible. But no, this is not something that the government should put you in jail over. However, we've also seen the case of the grooming gangs and stuff like that. Authorities, for some reason, are really afraid of putting people in jail for something that are all out and out, indisputable, violent crimes. And I think what you have here is this very different, between the elites and the normies or the proletariat, whatever term you like to use. The elites have one idea of what kind of crimes are most serious, misgendering and social media posts and stuff like that. Violent crimes, it's not happening in our neighborhood. We don't worry about that too much. Whereas the perspective of the normies is exactly the opposite. I look at this and I see this as a decision to try to get people away from jury trials because we don't trust juries anymore because they're going to punish, violent criminals instead of those misgendering miscreants out there. Sorry, I'm not buying it. It's a really bad development in the UK. Hopefully there's some serious pushback to this.
Exactly. And the left in other countries, including this one, are probably paying close attention in this case because the bottom line is if you're charged with a crime, the government is charging you. The government puts on the trial. And now the government, someone who works for the government, is going to decide whether or not you're innocent or guilty. And we've seen plenty of politically tainted judges in this country. Now, depending if you're on trial for anything that has some sort of connection to like meme posting, like you said, or not wanting the current immigration policies to continue over there, whatever it is, it's harder to believe that you're going to get a fair trial over there for sure. And for David Lammy in another comment to say, we have to have this so that women and girls who have unfortunately been subjected to rape can get a faster trial. And like you said, they've been covering up for these grooming gang rapes and so forth for a very long time. Slap on the wrist or no charges at all. It's absolutely incredible. And there's also a story this week about an IT consultant from Britain who was arrested by police after he got home because he posted a picture online of himself posing with a gun while he was in the United States. Jim, I think I would want a jury and not some judge who's probably pretty familiar with the prosecutor.
I would really like to see them lay out what crime did he commit there? What violation of the laws in the United Kingdom did he break while he apparently fired a gun at a gun range and posed with the gun? Which one was the crime, and how did it harm anybody in the UK? And the state is less. I think there are a whole bunch of people in law enforcement who are really interested in going after symbolic crimes while neglecting, crimes.
That's exactly right. So we had a lot of reasons to rebel from the UK. Trial by jury and a lot of the common law was not a big part of it. It was the British refusal to follow it in a lot of cases in colonial courts and so forth. But we adopted a lot of what they did, and to watch the UK fade and crumble in a lot of different ways this year has been very, very difficult.
Yeah,
so.
Greg, by the way, we don't want to completely tear apart the special relationship, and we should point out that if we feel like Britain is, reacting in vehemently anti-American ways, let's point out we did inflict Meghan Markle on them.
It's all vindictive vengeance for Meghan Markle, which you could understand on some level. But anyway, well, if that makes you tip back a pint or two, I can understand that. But don't take it out on your liver when you see terrible government policies like this, because we're all trying to feel healthy, drink more water, get more steps, take our vitamins. But you got to take care of your liver health, and that's where Dose comes in. It's a clinically backed liver health supplement. It's a liquid, daily 2-ounce shot. Tastes like fresh squeezed orange juice, 0 sugar, 0 junk, 0 calories, and most importantly, it works. It cleanses the liver of unwanted stressors, and there are plenty of tests that back that up.
It's the holiday season. It's, special microbrews and glute wine and all kinds of joyful stuff. Champagne around New Year's. Well, look, that's going to take a toll on your liver, which processes everything you consume and performs more than 500 daily functions. We're talking about energy production, digestion, fat metabolism, vitamin storage. And when your liver is overworked, you're going to feel it. So when you start drinking Dose daily, you're going to reduce that sluggishness. You're going to get rid of those midday crashes, support your metabolism, and it can even aid your daily digestion.
Yeah, and there's 2 double-blind placebo-controlled studies showing its positive impact on your liver enzyme levels. So if you're ready to give your liver the support it deserves, head to dosedaily.co/3ml or enter 3ml to get 35% off the first month of your subscription. Your body does so much for you. Let's do something for it. That's dosedaily.co/3ml for 35% off your first month's subscription. All right, Jim, this story has been around for a very long time, and the update has even been around for a few months, but we've known for a long time that you and I, at our age, will Social Security actually be around by the time we're eligible for it? It's not looking great. And so one of the latest things that we've seen, and this was reported by the Washington Post earlier in the year, Axios has finally picked up on it now, is that the Social Security Trust Fund, previously projected to be insolvent by 2035 and Medicare in 2036, now predicted that the Social Security Fund will run out of money in 2033 or in 2034 if Congress changes the law to combine the separate funds for old age benefits and for disability insurance. And the Post have reported for years the programs have been spending more money than they take in, as an aging workforce means more retirees are receiving benefits and fewer workers are paying taxes into the system. And so ultimately, this is going to come down to either trying to get more taxes to keep the coffers filled, or at least enough to give people their benefits, or there's going to be reduced benefits, which nobody's going to love. And I'm sure everybody's going to point the finger of blame when we've seen this coming, Jim. For decades, Bill Clinton had a special commission about this in the 90s that everybody promptly ignored the recommendations of. We talk about how nobody wants to confront spending, and so we're just spiraling, and not quite sure how we're going to get out of this one.
I was going to say, I can get annoyed with, in fact, you and I have called out Republicans for doing a particularly lousy job on this for a long time. At the end, there's also part of me that points out, certainly, the only Democratic answer is raise taxes. They always want to raise taxes. They always, taxing the rich is always their answer to everything. At some point, you have to recognize, yes, the politicians are cowards. Yes, the politicians always want to kick the can down the road. Yes, the politicians want to avoid the problem and talk about any other issue possibly on earth. But part of the problem, Greg, is with the electorate itself. It's with the people who basically either A, would rather not talk about the issue themselves. They certainly aren't demanding detailed answers from this. Sometimes when a couple of folks in the media do ask, what is your plan on Social Security? There's like this resentment, but even more, like every time someone on the right, generally in the Republican Party, offers some sort of potential solution, they get accused of trying to kill grandma. We remember the infamous ad of Paul Ryan allegedly pushing grandma off the cliff. George W. Bush had Daniel Patrick Moynihan on a bipartisan commission. And the idea was, at that point, we were going to take a certain amount of your Social Security payments. And instead of putting into the Social Security system, you'd put them into not a lockbox, that was Al Gore's idea. You're going to put it into an investment fund, basically your IRA, and you were going to start investing in it. And people said back in the back in 2005, 2006, this is a terrible and dangerous time to put your money in the stock market. Oh my goodness. Now, 2008, Wall Street meltdown. Yeah, that would look pretty bad. But you know what? It rebounded. Took a little while, but it rebounded. And if you put the money, if you had invested that money then, probably 20 years ago, you'd have tons of money right now, right? Whole bunch. Right now, stock market's on a tear. We've talked in the past about how, the S&P 493 is not as great. It's up about, 100%. If you're in that big seven, Amazon, Apple, companies like that, they're up 1,000% since January 2019, right? They've had a phenomenal 6-year run. So here's the thing. I hope you're enjoying some part of that. But if you had your Social Security money, it does not go to a lockbox, as Al Gore had said. I don't do nearly as well as Greg does. But Al, it just, remember, the money gets taken over to the government. The government immediately spends that, and then they return it. They write an IOU. And people who have been in Democratic administrations who have said, "Oh my God, this is terrible. This is no way to run a retirement system." You're just pretending you have money when you don't. Have ended up in running the Department of the Treasury and have said, no, this is totally safe the moment they get into the office. It is as if this is like this giant, like it's the Tinkerbell solution from the Peter Pan musical. If you just believe the money is there, then it will be there. But it really isn't. And that's one of the reasons So the problem is now 8 years away. And people say, wait a minute, I've been hearing the Social Security is on the verge of collapse. Yeah, well, sometimes sometimes you get more payments into the system. Or Greg, sometimes you get really lucky and there's a Chinese lab leak and it creates this virus that kills off a lot of old and sick people. Old and sick people are the ones who create all the expenditures for Social Security. So, I'm saying that thoroughly tongue-in-cheek. The death of the elderly is a terrible thing. But also, that's the sort of thing, like we have fewer elderly people than we did before because 1 million Americans got killed by COVID and most of them were elderly. So all of a sudden, the amount of money being paid out to people changes. So, that's where we are. And on this podcast, you and I talk about this all the time. And we might as well be shouting into the Grand Canyon. It does absolutely no good whatsoever. Americans want to pretend this problem doesn't exist. They'll deal with it later when we're rapidly running out of later. But you know what? When you have an octogenarian president like Joe Biden, they don't really care. They're not going to be around. It's not their problem. When you have a septuagenarian, almost octogenarian president like Donald Trump, he's not going to worry about it either. So we just get closer and closer to the cliff, and nobody really seems to care. So this is our crazy martini. And folks, I have a strong suspicion this will show up at some point in our end of the year awards coming up later this month.
Yeah, and when you're running $2 trillion deficits, that timetable only gets worse. Yeah, you mentioned January 2005. The Dow was around 10,500. Where's it now? 47,000? So, yeah, you would have been doing very well. Yeah, Social Security has always been a terrible return. Just putting into a savings account most years, but would have been a better return. But yeah, major opportunity missed. And again, neither party has the guts to do what's necessary here. Just nuts. All right, Jim, on that lovely note, we'll call time for today and we'll tee it up again for tomorrow. See you then.
See you tomorrow, Greg.
Jim Garrity, National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks so much for being with us today. Please be sure to subscribe to the 3 Martini Lunch. If you don't already, tell your friends about us as well. Thanks also for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please keep those coming. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch podcast. Follow us on X. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Greg Corombos. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram at 3 Martini Lunch, the number 3 Martini Lunch. Have a great Tuesday. Join us again Wednesday for the 3 Martini Lunch.